Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. I'm here to present SB 507, which will require the CEC to assess EV charging infrastructure needed to support the levels of electric vehicle adoption required to meet the state's goals through 2035. Very similar to Senator Min's bills, but on the light-duty side. Specifically, my bill will require the CEC to assess the deployment of charging infrastructure to low-income community members, rural communities, car-sharing and ride-sharing drivers, and residents of multifamily housing facilities. If the CEC finds that these groups are not on track to meet the 2035 EV goals in their assessment, the bill will also require the Commission to identify the barriers that exist and develop solutions. Testifying in support of this measure today, I have Corey Bullis from Flow EV Charging and Marquis Mason from the California Environmental Voters. Thank you, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote of SB 507.
Thank you. Lead witness.
Chair and members, Corey Bullis on behalf of Flow EV Charging. We are an EV charging station manufacturer and network operator. Founded in 2009, to date we have over 80,000 charging stations deployed across North America. As the Senator noted, the state has been projecting infrastructure needs across the state out to 2030 for a few years now, but really it's kind of time to take that analysis to the next level, or to take it down a level, in the sense of figuring out what are the infrastructure needs for various underserved driver segments. The work to date has been very helpful in figuring out what types of charging infrastructure do we need, where do we need it, are we on track to meet those goals, and now we want to make sure we're doing that as well for the various underserved driver segments notated by the Senator, and these are typically groups that have the most trouble accessing charging infrastructure. These are many driver segments that we as a company are focused on. And if we're going to be fully electrifying transportation, we need to make sure we are deploying chargers everywhere where drivers go, but making sure all communities are accessing charging infrastructure. And we think this bill will help kind of create that roadmap to make sure we're on track. So for those reasons, respectfully ask your aye vote.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support. State your name and organization.
Hey there, my name is Marquis King Mason. I'm with California Environmental Voters. And so news this weekend broke that the world is losing its chance to avert catastrophic warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we know that transportation emissions are one of the largest pieces of that puzzle, but also one of the most straightforward to reduce. With this reminder of impending climate collapse, there will be renewed calls to swiftly move away from carbon in transportation, as there should be. However, we can't do that equitably if we are not laser focused on the barriers that specifically impact frontline and underserved communities. We already know that renters and those living in apartments and condos face greater barriers to having an electric vehicle, but we still don't have as clear a picture as we should. We know things like the racial homeownership gap directly contribute to the unequal electric vehicle access playing field, where people of color are 30% less likely to own a home than their white counterparts. We know that communities of color reliance on rideshare economy directly impacts their day-to-day lives, with California having the highest number of rideshare drivers, approaching 300,000. But we don't know all these things and how much would we need to upgrade electric panels for low-income households, proportional to the rate that we need to electrify, as stated under current statutes. SB 507 is needed to assess just how uneven the charging infrastructure playing field is. In the 2022 budget, you all worked really hard alongside advocates to make sure that we had unprecedented numbers of investments for low-income people in ZEV vehicles, but we don't have a full picture of what's going on. SB 507 will help ensure that we are spending every dollar strategically as possible, while not contributing to, and relegating underserved communities to delayed exposure to air pollution, and lesser options to engage in the green economy that we are building up. SB 507 fits perfectly into the policy container that bills like AB 2127 and SB 1000 have built, alongside helping to achieve the goals that years of executive orders affirm that we are wholly shifting away from fossil-powered vehicles. We all understand the idea that we can't deal with what we can't define, and that's why California Environmental Voters strongly urge you to your support on SB 507.
Thank you. Any additional witnesses in room 1200 who wish to testify in support of SB 507? Just state your name and your organization, please.
Good morning, Lee Kamrick with the Rural County Representatives of California in support.
Good morning, Margie Lee on behalf of the California New Car Dealers Association in support.
Thank you. Any additional witnesses? Hearing seen none. Now witnesses in opposition. Are there any witnesses in opposition here in room 1200? All right, seeing none. Let's move to our phone lines, moderator. We're looking for witnesses in support or opposition of SB 507.
If you would like to make a comment, please press 1, then 0. We'll first go to line number 20. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Kyler Joaquin calling on behalf of the California Coalition of Utility Employees, expressing our support for SB 507. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to the line number 16. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Kathy Schaefer on behalf of the San Fernando Valley and Los Angeles chapters of the Climate Reality Project in support. Thank you.
Next, we'll go to line number 28. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Christina Scaringe for the Center for Biological Diversity in support of SB 507.
And at this time, there are no further lines in queue.
Thank you. We'll now bring it back to the committee. Are there any questions or concerns? Senator Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is equally a good bill as Mr. Mann's bill, and I want to be added as a co-author. And I think this is an issue that, I've grappled with for a little while in terms of trying to reach our goals, but we continue to, in my opinion, miss the mark in terms of really understanding the needs of low-income communities and what we need to do to make sure that they're coming along, because they're well-stuffed and being left out of the conversation. And I hear that from my community, as I'm sure the great senator from Long Beach does as well. So I just think it's an important bill to really understand the needs and tackle the issues. How do we get our underserved and low-income families to want to participate? And so I appreciate you doing this. I think it's important. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Caballero.
Thank you very much. Appreciate this bill as well. I just want to make sure that we're doing as thorough a needs assessment as possible and raise some issues that I think have discriminated against the Valley. One is, if you put the charging stations on Highway 5, you're benefiting the traveling public that's going the fastest they can through the Central Valley, but are totally inaccessible to residents that live in the Central Valley. And so if you put them on 99, then you're putting them where people live. More generally, there's a denser population. There's a real need to differentiate between the types of charging devices. And if you're going to put them in, I really think we have to look where we should deploy them, whether they should be commercial centers, business centers, or residential. Quite frankly, I think the commercial and the residential the commercial and the business win over the residential, because the residential then end up getting assigned to one or two people as opposed to the more heavily traveled sites. So for that reason, I think we need the fast charging devices. Otherwise, people don't have 8 hours to sit around and wait for their vehicles to charge. I also think we need to have a very frank discussion about PG&E accessibility, and the issue that was raised by my good friend from Bakersfield is really true. PG&E is having real problems with making connections, and we can move to all electric vehicles, but if then PG&E can't hook anybody up and we have to use diesel charging devices, that defeats the whole purpose. And then I absolutely think we have to have uniform charging ports. This whole idea that we can pepper them with specialty ports and then we can't access them when we need them doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that's, I really appreciate the reflection on disadvantaged communities, but it's really broader than that. We need to create a system that is accessible to everyone, and right now that just doesn't exist. If you stop on Highway 5 at the Santanella stop, Tesla's got 1 million charging devices, and they're always empty, and it's just not accessible for people. So those are my comments. I'm going to support your bill today. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional question? Senator Daly.
I got to get his attention. I sit right next to him. Thanks for bringing this bill forward. I have a question. One of the things that I think, we talk about the underserved and disadvantaged communities, and you get a charging station there, but is there any, I didn't actually look at the language of the bill, I just looked at the report, but is there any ability to be able to, when we talk about those low-income folks in disadvantaged communities, has anybody did an analysis, or does this bill do the analysis on the ability to be able to first afford the EV in the first place, if there's a charging station available, and then the cost to actually charge it once you have the vehicle? I know that in my district, where we have, we've been attempting to try to incentivize and help put in stations strategically throughout this very rural area. But the people that are able to buy the EV, or the low and disadvantaged community, can't afford the EV, and then at the same time, there's a cost to charging that. So will this bill analyze that data? I think that's really critical. When we talk about the disadvantaged folks, are they going to be able to actually get the vehicle in the first place? And then are they going to be able to afford to charge the vehicle?
Yeah, thank you very much, through the chair, Senator Daly. This just talks about the infrastructure, but to your point, very much understand what you're saying. I think vehicles, as the analysis points out, I think the vehicle part, of course, we want to make sure that we're tackling as well in unison. I think what we have in our data is that in 2024 through 2029, we should get cost parity with cars going down as low as maybe $30,000. But there's still equity issues. There's still barriers to that. Of course, we know that. But the infrastructure needs to be put in place first in order for folks to feel like they're being invested in this EV space. So this is why the infrastructure piece here in assessing not just disadvantaged communities, but rural communities. I think I take note to what Senator Caballero is saying with the commercial and businesses, but also the cost of charging, all of that. And those are going to be developed in this bill through the CEC to assess everything, map it out, and then provide solutions. And I would hope to, again, continue to explicitly put more in this bill to make it even better for that.
Well, just to add on, I think really what really needs to happen is if we need to look at what the annual income is of a person who's disadvantaged, and then do the math to figure out, even if a car's $30,000, and then if the infrastructure is put in place, which is going to be a cost, and the rising cost of electricity is not going to go down. When we need all this production of electricity, is not going to go down. It's going to go up because we have to build all that infrastructure. So I know this is along the same lines as Senator Min's bill, and we need to put all the information in so we can really target the people we're trying to target, which is those low-income, disadvantaged communities that are typically places where the air quality is really the worst. So I would encourage you to look at that piece of it, because at the end of the day, to make a really good decision on not just citing them, but the ability for those people to access these EV vehicles is going to be critical in the future.
And we did much of that work last year, too, waiving the sales tax, clean cars for all in all air quality districts. We have a lot more work to do, so I look forward to working with you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Durazo.
Thank you. And I just want to echo what my colleague just said about the information that's needed. I have a bill that would require more of a socioeconomic analysis. We shouldn't be afraid of getting the information that you're talking about and other information, especially economic impact. And that's what usually is missing, because it's about environmental impact, which is great, but what about economic impact? So I really appreciate that you're digging in on that piece in this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussions, questions? Well, I too want to thank the author for this bill, but I do have the same concerns that Senator Caballero and Senator Daly raised as to, I think we're taking the chicken or the egg approach of what comes first, and when poor folks can't afford the chicken or the egg right now. So, and I participated in a hearing a couple years back in the Central Valley, and the individuals testified that, one, they couldn't afford an electric car. So if you can't afford an electric car, then I see no need of charging stations in that community. But the individual said, even if I could afford an electric car, they're not big enough to meet my need. The individual said, I'm a farm worker, my wife's a domestic worker, and I have 4 kids that play soccer. I could never haul my equipment and all those things. So those are some of the challenges that we have to come to the realization. Some folks just will never own electric cars. So having infrastructure is important, but I think we have to be a little bit more strategic, and I know that's what you're trying to get to at the end of the day, of making sure they're in the neighborhoods that people eventually will want to own one, but a lot of folks, as Senator Daly says, can't afford it. So I appreciate what you're doing here. Would you like to close?
I would just say, I hear everything you're saying loud and clear. We're going to continue working on the vehicle side. I think this provides market signals to private, capital as well to be able to help us out with some of these important needs that we have across the state. So with that, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. We have a due pass to transportation. Is there a motion? It's been moved by Senator Eggman. Consultant, please call the roll on SB 507.
Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford, aye. Dally.
Aye.
Dally, aye. Ashby.
Yes.
Ashby, aye. Becker.
Aye.
Becker, aye. Caballero.
Aye.
Caballero, aye. Dodd.
Aye.
Dodd, aye. Durazo. Eggman.
Aye.
Eggman, aye. Gonzalez. Gonzalez, aye. Grove.
Aye.
Grove, aye. McGuire. Min.
Aye.
Min, aye. Newman.
Aye.
Newman, aye. Rubio.
Aye.
Rubio, aye. Ciarto.
Aye.
Ciarto, aye. Skinner.
Aye.
Skinner, aye. Stern. Wilk.
Aye.
Wilk, aye. 15.
That measure has 15 votes. It's out. We'll leave the roll open for our absent members.